Hey guys, Gino here. So right now, more and more people, and from all backgrounds and all walks of life, are realizing that they need to own some type of firearm to protect themselves and to defend their families, loved ones, and property. So what I am going to do today is discuss, shoot, and demonstrate some of the advantages and disadvantages of what I consider to be two pretty good choices for self-defense. And they're both Smith Wesson J-frame revolvers. One is a Model 642 Performance Center, and the other is a standard Model 640. So stick around, should be fun. So let's go over some of the characteristics of the two revolvers that I'm featuring in today's video. And both the revolvers are clear. The first one is the Smith & Wesson Model 642-2, and it is a Performance Center edition. The other revolver is a Smith & Wesson Model 640, and it's a -3. It might be easier for me to cover some of the similarities, and then I'll tell you about some of the differences. So they are both Smith & Wesson J-frame revolvers. As you can see, they have internal hammers. So these must be fired double action only. There's no external hammer like most revolvers where you can, cock the hammer back and fire it single action. These are double action only. Another similarity is the shape or profile of the grips. So on the 642 Performance Center, they're wooden, and they do have this little bit of a weave pattern in them, which is kind of nice. They look really nice. On the Model 640, they are just a hard rubber factory Smith & Wesson grip. What's nice about them is they are the longer profile grip for the J-frame. So most of the J-frames you see out there in the gun shops or the stores have boot grips on them. They're about 1/2 inch shorter, so you can only get your 2 fingers around that grip. Your pinky's kind of left out there hanging. With these grips, you can actually get your pinky on, and where that is a huge advantage is in mitigating recoil as you're firing the weapon. Having that little bit of extra grip really helps out. To me, it outweighs the little bit of loss of concealability you get without having that boot grip. So another similarity, the sights. So if I can get this in camera, both the rear sights are just kind of molded into the top of the frame of the revolvers, and both the front sights are ramped and serrated. So I want to say the last similarity between the two revolvers, they both hold 5 rounds. Now let's talk about some of the differences. The 642 Performance Center. So the 642 Performance Center has an aluminum alloy frame, which makes it really lightweight. The revolver weighs just under 1 pound. Now, the cylinder and the barrel, they're both stainless steel. So they have a little heft to them, but the frame itself, the entire frame, is aluminum alloy. So it actually weighs like 0.91 pounds or 14.7 ounces. Lightweight revolver. The 640 has a stainless steel frame, a stainless steel cylinder, and a stainless steel barrel. So it's significantly heavier than the 642. Actually almost 1/2 pound heavier. It makes a big difference. The revolver weighs 1.38 pounds compared to the 0.91 pounds. So it's about 0.41 pounds heavier. 22.1 ounces, if you prefer in ounces. That brings up another difference. The 642 Performance Center is a 38 Special plus P revolver, so it's rated for continuous plus P usage. However, the Model 640 is a 357 Magnum, so it'll still fire 38 Special plus P, but it's also rated to fire 357 Magnum, and that's where that extra weight kind of definitely comes in handy. And another difference you can see is the profile of the barrels. This 640's barrel is significantly thicker than the 642 Performance Center. You can probably also see the 642 Performance Center barrel is 1.875 inches, and the 640 barrel is 2.1 inches. All right. One other thing, this being a performance center model, they bill it as having an enhanced action, or basically a trigger job. So the trigger pull on the 642 is about 2 pounds lighter than your normal J-frame revolver. It's really nice. The first time I pulled the trigger on this, or dry fired it, I did it with a J-frame, and the difference is just huge. Now, it still has a heavy trigger pull, but it's about 2 pounds lighter than your average J-frame. But the difference is the smoothness of the trigger pull. So as soon as your finger touches the trigger, there's no take up whatsoever. You immediately feel the trigger, you get resistance. And as you pull the trigger, as you pull through the entire rotation of the cylinder, it's just very, very smooth. That's going to give you an advantage when you're shooting this revolver. It's going to help keep you on target. You're not going to have that heavy and a little bit gritty trigger pull that could pull you off target a little bit. Definitely worth the extra money for that enhanced trigger action. Okay, so the first revolver I'll be firing today will be the 642-2 Performance Center. I'll be firing the first cylinder out of this revolver from 4 yards. Still at 4 yards with the 642-2. This will be the last cylinder out of the 642-2 at about 4 yards. All right, so next up will be the 640, and as with the 642, this is a brand new revolver. I've never fired it other than dry firing. I'm going to shoot from the same distance, about 4.5 yards. All right, this is the second cylinder out of the 640 at about 4.5 yards. This will be the third cylinder out of the 640, same distance. This time I'm going to maybe slow down a little and try and shoot at the head. Alright guys, I wanted to show you this DeSantis pocket holster, and I'm going to try that out. I'm just wearing Levi's. I'm going to go back to the 642. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the weapon in the pocket holster and put it in my pocket, and then I'll move back to the front of the camera, draw, and fire 5 more rounds. I'm going to do the same thing. It's still the 642-2 in the pocket holster. So for some reason I had a misfire on one of the rounds, and as you can see, I just kept pulling the trigger and letting the cylinder go back around until it did fire that round. That's one of the benefits of having a revolver style weapon, and it is clear it did fire that 5th round. Where if you'd have had a semi-automatic, and you get some type of failure to feed or a stovepipe, it's a whole different set of actions to clear that malfunction before you can get that semi-automatic back in action. Where with the revolver, as I did, and they're all fired as you can see, but all I did was continue to pull until it went all the way back around and fired that round. I'm going to switch back to the 640, and I'm also going to do the same thing. That the DeSantis pocket holster fits all the it fits the J frames that I have today, the 642-2 and this 640. All right, I'm going to fire one more cylinder out of the 640 using the DeSantis pocket holster. As with the earlier light primer strike, I would assume that didn't fire, and I just kept pulling the trigger. One of the benefits of having a revolver over a semi-automatic could be if you're potentially right up against an attacker or an aggressor, and you actually have to pull the weapon, you have the muzzle against that person's body. With a semi-automatic, that could push the slide out of battery. With the revolver, you don't have that worry. And I'll just kind of demonstrate it on this target, although there's no body mass that I'll be pushing against. It's a paper target, but just to kind of give you the general idea. And I'm still using the 640 in the DeSantis pocket holster. So I am going to provide a little bit better visual demonstration of what I'm talking about. And I have two semi-automatic handguns, and they've been checked, they are unloaded. One of them is hammer fired and the other is striker fired. Let's talk about the hammer fired first. If you are being physically attacked and you draw this weapon in self-defense, during that physical struggle, there's a potential for the muzzle of this weapon to get pushed against that attacker. And if that happens, it could move the slide slightly to the rear. That's what's known as coming out of battery. And if this weapon comes out of battery, you cannot fire it. At that point, you would potentially have to try and create some space between you and that attacker to get this handgun to fire. And it works the same way with the striker fired handguns. This is a little SIG P365, great little carry gun, I love it. But if you're being physically attacked and you draw this weapon and it gets pressed against that attacker and causes the slide to come out of battery, it won't fire. Again, you're going to have to try and create some space between you and that attacker to fire this handgun. That's where the J-frame revolver holds an advantage over the semi-autos. If you're being physically attacked, life or death situation, and you draw this revolver, even if the attacker's entire body weight is on top of you and pressed against the muzzle of this weapon, it will fire. Another benefit to a revolver over a semi-automatic type handgun is, I know the military, which taught me, you come up, when you draw the weapon, you should come up to a close ready and begin presenting the weapon. And as you're presenting the weapon, potentially you may have to start firing at that point before you're fully extended and get a great sight picture. As long as you have that front sight, you should hit something. The problem with that is, with a semi-automatic, if you pull it up to the close ready and it's here near your chest area and you need to fire at this point because the attacker's coming, the slide is going to hit, potentially cause a bruise, potentially cause it to misfire, something like that. Where with the revolver, there's no slide to move back and forth. Obviously it's a revolver. that is just turning and firing, so you won't have that problem. If you draw the weapon and you're still at the close ready and you need to, you can at that point fire, and you have no fear of being injured from the weapon or having to come out of battery. I'll kind of demonstrate it here, although I think you guys get the idea. But say that the attacker or the aggressor started coming towards you. At that point, you know, it was dangerous enough that you actually needed to draw a weapon. You draw it, bring it to the close ready, and potentially at that point they see it and they speed up their attack. So as soon as you get it to the close ready, you could potentially fire from that position with no worries of it coming out of battery or the slide, you know, hitting you. One other benefit I want to talk about real quick to the J-frame revolver, and this one is clear. With the J-frames, at least the 640, the 642, you have no external hammer. So there's nothing, no moving part here to catch on anything. And it's a benefit over a semi-automatic. Obviously, we talked about you have a slide that moves back and forth as it ejects and then rechambers around. So the benefit is, if you're wearing a jacket or some type of clothing where you would have pockets here in the front, you could have this revolver in your pocket and potentially fire it through the clothing. So I'm not going to fire through any clothing today. I'm just pointing this out that you could do this. Say you had an aggressor and you're trying to, you know, push them back, keep them back, but it escalated to the point where you're willing to use deadly force. At that point, if you have your hand in your pocket, you could fire the revolver through the clothing. It's just one of the benefits of having one of these little J-frames as a carry weapon. Alright guys, I'm going to shift over to my steel targets. The first one's a little over 5 yards, the second one's almost 8 yards, a little under 8, and the third one's about 10 yards. And I'm going to go back to the 642-2, and I have a couple of the Bianchi speed strips, so hopefully that'll help speed this up just a little bit. Alright guys, so I'm going to switch back to the 640, and I'm going to do the same thing. I have two of the Bianchi speed strips, fire 3 cylinders at the steel targets, and I did paint them to clean them up. If you're not familiar with the speed strips you can buy for revolvers, they hold 6 rounds. You just push them in there. It's flexible rubber. I just put 5 rounds for today, just because I'm shooting it here on the range. But what you do is you put 2 in, kind of rip it away, put the next 2 in, rip it away, final one, and you're reloaded. So let's talk about the ammunition that I chose to use with the revolvers. And what I did not do was I didn't go out there and try and find the hottest or the most powerful rounds that I could put through the revolvers. I went to the opposite of that. What I did was I researched for low recoil 38 special rounds so that I could give some advice as to how the lower recoil rounds felt for those out there that are more recoil sensitive. Maybe due to size, stature, physical limitations, arthritis injuries, things like that. And the research led me to the 148 grain wad cutters, and those could be used as a self-defense round, but the research also led me to these Remington UMC 130 grain full metal jacket rounds. And these are very similar to a 38 special round that the military used to have. It was called the M41, and they're plenty lethal with good shot placement. The research also led me to the Hornady Critical Defense 90 grain FTX rounds, but unfortunately everywhere I checked they were out of them. I did find some of the 110 grain, but I really wanted the 90 grain because I think the 90 grain would be more comparable in recoil to the Remington 130 grain. So I did shoot a couple of these. I literally shot 3 out of each revolver just to feel them. Now the 640. And there was definitely an increased feel in the recoil, more so out of the Model 642 Performance Center than out of the Model 640. But the 642 is a lighter revolver. As for the Remington 130 grain, I fired a little over 200 of these rounds, so approximately 100 through each revolver. And I found them to be really light recoiling, pleasurable or fun to shoot. And they do have just slightly more recoil out of the Model 642 Performance Center than out of the 640. But even out of the 642, they were still very controllable, very comfortable to shoot. And I think these would be a really good choice for someone out there who's looking for a low recoil 38 special round. So I'm going to shoot one cylinder first with the 642-2 offhand. All right, so now I'm going to shoot offhand with the 640. So before I finish out this video, I wanted to come back and talk to you about some of the advantages and disadvantages to the revolvers. For one thing, it's hard to beat the dependability of a revolver. They typically require less maintenance than, say, a semi-automatic. They're very simple to use and operate. And as opposed to a semi-auto where you have to unload and reload magazines every few weeks, maybe once a month, so that the springs in the magazines don't get weakened and cause a failure to feed, you can load a revolver, lock it up in a safe for 20 years, open the safe, pull it out, and it'll fire. Now, these little Smith Wesson J-frame revolvers, snub nose revolvers, they're made for close distance self-defense, similar to the paper target I was shooting at the beginning of the video. And those were the very first shots that I put through both these revolvers. But even so, I think you could see that they were really easy to get on target and really fast to shoot right into the critical areas that would end a bad guy. Now, these two revolvers specifically, I'm torn between which one I personally like better. The 642 that has that enhanced action, the trigger pull is just so smooth and nice, it keeps you right on target. But then again, the 640, it's almost a half pound heavier, so there's less felt recoil, and which helps keep you on target. For carry purposes, the 642 Performance Center, because of its light weight, would be much easier to carry in a pocket or in a purse or in an inside waistband holster. Whereas the 640, I think it's a little too heavy for pocket carry, at least for very long. Now, if you're carrying it for minutes as opposed to hours, pocket carry might be okay. But for me, if I had to carry it for a significant amount of time, I would want an inside waistband holster. It's just a little too heavy for pocket carry. Another thing to note, the Performance Center, the 642, has that aluminum alloy frame, and Smith & Wesson puts like a clear coat on top of it. And you can do a quick Google search. Sometimes that clear coat tends to flake off in certain areas. Whereas the 640 with the all stainless steel frame, cylinder, barrel, When you pass this on to your great-great-granddaughter or great-great-grandson, it's going to look the same way as the day you bought it. All right, so real quick, let's go over the two main negatives, at least the two main negatives for me. Number one is capacity. You get 5 to stay alive. And I know they make, speed loaders, speed strips like I used, different things that you can use to reload as quick as possible with these revolvers. But the fact is they only have 5 rounds, and that to me is a negative. The other negative is the sights. The sights are really hard to acquire as you aim the revolver. The rear sight, it's just so low because it's molded right into the top of the frame, and the notch that you're supposed to center that front sight between is very, very narrow. Another issue with the 642 PC, the front sight is the exact same color as the rest of the revolver, so you really do lose it. So today, what I did was I used the point and shoot technique, where you just present the revolver and you look right over the frame, and as soon as you have that front sight in the target area, you just start firing. And that's an effective way to use these little J-frame revolvers out to 7, 8, maybe 10 yards max. But these sights do not lend itself to any accuracy. But the good thing is there's an easy fix. So if you just take a paint pen and orange or red, whatever color you'd prefer, and kind of splash them on the top half of the ramp on that front sight, I think it would make a huge difference in the accuracy in both the close range and the long range targets.
I'm going to try that 26 yard.
All right, so lastly, one of the common negative things about snub nose revolvers is the recoil, the felt recoil. Now, if you have forearms like Popeye, plus P 357 all day. But for the rest of us, we have to find the combination that works within our recoil sensitivity level. Whether that's the 130 grain Remington or the Hornady Critical Defense 90 grain FTX rounds of the 642 and the recoil is fine and comfortable, you're good to go. If that's still too much recoil, maybe using those rounds in the heavier 640, maybe that'll work. Another option, if you're really recoil sensitive, Smith Wesson does make these J-frames in 22 long rifle and 22 Magnum, so they have even less felt recoil. But whatever you choose or whatever you end up picking, my advice to you is to get some training on it. Get some training on it, get familiar with that weapon. Once you're familiar with it, you need to practice, practice, practice. And if you do wind up going with one of these double action only type revolvers, you need to dry fire over and over and over so that you know exactly what the double action trigger pull feels like. And obviously you need to take it to the range. You need to shoot it. You need to shoot it with the ammunition that you're going to carry. You want to know exactly what type of recoil to expect and what type of accuracy that you're going to get should you have to draw this weapon in self-defense.
Alright guys, that ends the shooting for today. I want to give you one last look at the revolvers. They are both clear. So the 642 Performance Center and the 640, both Smith and Wessons. There's a little bit of, smoke and carbon on them. Not too bad. But, I think I've said it in other videos. Part of my enjoyment after shooting is going and cleaning up the whatever weapon I happen to use that day. All right, guys, I think I'm gonna get out of here. It's pretty hot. As usual, I had a lot of fun shooting the steel. Any day I can come out and shoot steel is a really good day, and I will see you guys next time.